Hello, thank you for stopping by. My name is Becky and this is BecxReadz, and today I have a recommendation collab for you. Are we surprised? I am collabing with Lisa at Babe and Library to bring you romances that don't end with babies. As someone who does not have tiny humans of my own and has no desire to have children of my own, I love seeing romances that don't end with babies. I don't have a problem if my favorite characters have babies. It's not like a no-go for me by any means. I do like seeing that every now and then. But I also like seeing it represented and shown that you can have a happily ever after without babies being brought into the equation. But the books that I'm going to share with you, they don't end in babies. However, some of them may be part of interconnected series where further down the line, this couple may have a baby eventually. But for the specific books that I am sharing, no babies are mentioned. Babies do not take part in the story. They completely end and no babies are born. The first series that I'm going to share with you is my favorite series ever, and it doesn't end with babies, and that is the Wraith King series by Grace Draven. The first two books, Radiance and Eidolon, follow Brishan and Ildiko. Ildiko is a human, Brishan is a Kai warrior. He's got gray skin, claws, glowing eyes. And they are put into an arranged marriage for the benefit of their people as an alliance. These two find each other very ugly to begin with, but they do start off as friends and they grow to develop a fondness for one another, and that fondness eventually leads to attraction. However, Brishan and Ildiko are not reproductively compatible. I'm not exactly sure why, because I've read books where, like, monsters and humans, they compatible. Brishan is not that different from a human male, let me tell you, so I'm really not sure why they're not reproductively compatible, but I really appreciated Grace Draven putting that element into her story. The third book, The Ippos King, we follow Saravek and Aniset, and once again, Aniset is a Kai warrior and Saravek is a human, so they are also not reproductively compatible, and babies, it's mentioned in the story as sort of a conflict, but he doesn't care. He's totally fine with not having children because he loves Aniset so much. So this is definitely a series that I highly recommend if you want a really unique fantasy romance, friends to lovers, that doesn't end in babies. The next romance I have to recommend is Sword Heart by T. Kingfisher. This is another fantasy romance. This is about Hala and Sarkis. When Hala inherits her great-uncle's estate, his relatives are not happy about it. So they lock Hala in a room and they force her to stay there until she agrees to marry her cousin so that they can take over her inheritance. And she's fed up. She's about at the end of her rope. She decides to stab herself with a sword. So she pulls the sword off the wall to impale herself when this man, Sarkis, pops out of the sword. And he is bound by oath to protect the new wielder of the sword from anybody who wants to cause her harm, including her relatives. So they escape. They set out on this mission to try and track down a way to rid Hala of her relatives. And along the way, they form a relationship. Hala is a character who vocalizes the fact that she has no interest in having children, and Sarkis is okay with that. The next one I have to recommend to you is also a fantasy romance. Obviously, I read a lot of fantasy romance, and that is The Gardener and the Water Horse by Mallory Dunlin. This is about Saphira and Seelan. Saphira is on the run from this abusive wizard who wants to claim her when she takes this job as a gardener on this very remote, secluded island that houses this magical spire and is surrounded by this magical lake. And when she gets there, she's just trying to live her life and be the best gardener she can be when she attracts the attention of Seelan, who is the lake that surrounds this island. He is also a water horse. He is also a man. Lots going on there. So let me just recap. He's a man who is also a lake who can also shift into a water horse. He is very curious about humans. However, he's never really interacted with them. And Saphira is really releasing these unknown desires that he has. So he transforms into a man to get to know her. And he's also this water horse who is known for drowning people in his lake. But babies are nowhere mentioned in this story or in their relationship. So I very much appreciated this very weird dynamic, but I found it really interesting. The next romance I have to recommend is a paranormal romance. We have a switch up here. I don't recommend starting with this book because it is the 5th book in the series, but it is Noah by Jacqueline Frank. And in this book, we follow Noah, who is the king of the demons, and he ends up discovering that his fated mate is a woman he has never met. And his fated mate has a habit of getting herself into some very dangerous situations. And one time when he is spying on her, he sees her death. So he is willing to do whatever it takes by any means necessary, even if that means using his best friend's little girl to save his fated mate's life. His fated mate, Kestra, wants absolutely nothing to do with Noah. She's a very independent woman and she does not want to be tied to this man. But through their story, their relationship develops, and we learn that Kestra is unable to have children. So this causes a little bit of tension between her and Noah because Noah is a king, so he needs somebody to be his heir, but she is unable to have children. So I really liked how that was handled within this story. The next series I have to recommend to you is a fantasy romance series. So we're going backwards, and that is the Dark Magi series by Kel Carpenter. Quinn is released from slavery by Lazarus, who wants her to become his vassal and help him reclaim his throne. Lazarus is a dark magi. He is a soul eater, and he needs Quinn's special ability that she isn't really sure how to use yet. So throughout this series, we see her develop her magic and learn how to wield it. Quinn comes from a very abusive family. She has a very abusive past, and she's a very dangerous woman. So she actually mentions in this story that she doesn't think she would be a very good mother, and she does not see babies as part of her future. And Lazarus is completely fine with that. This is a very slow burn relationship development. It takes about 3 books for them to finally come to terms with the fact that they're attracted to one another. I really enjoy this entire series. It's action-packed, and I felt for every single character within this series. So definitely check this series out if you're looking for a slow burn, very expansive fantasy romance series that doesn't end in babies. We're going to stay with fantasy romance, and the next one I'm going to recommend is A Ship of Bones and Teeth by Karina Halley. Now, I've mentioned this book quite a few times this year. This is a dark Little Mermaid retelling about Marin and Ramsey. Marin gave up her fins in exchange for falling in love with Prince Eric, but 10 years into their very abusive marriage, she has had enough. She wants to go back to her sea and get her fins back, so she sets out on this mission to track down the sea witch to try and get her fins back. However, her and Eric's ship is commandeered by Captain Ramsey, who is a pirate, and he ends up bringing out Marin's deadly and dangerous side, and they end up in a romance together. But this book does not end in babies, and I can't recall babies even being mentioned as something that this couple even thinks about, which I really appreciated. My last 2 recommendations are mafia romance, so we're getting away from the fantasy, finally. The first one I have to recommend to you is Scarred Regrets by Adelaide Forrest. Now, I don't recommend starting with this because this is the 5th book in her Bellendy Crime Syndicate series. This is the romance between Scar and Arena. These two are very broken people. They have very tragic pasts, and Arena has this very upbeat personality, and Scar has always been protective of her, but he doesn't think he's capable of giving her love until Arena is captured by his enemies and he has to go after her, and he finally realizes that she is somebody who he is willing to give his heart to. However, when he saves Arena, she is not the same person who went missing. She is a shell of herself, and he really has to help her reclaim who she once was, and they end up in a relationship, a very beautiful relationship, to sort of help them through the traumas of their life. Now, this is one of the books that potentially this couple could have babies in further books, but at the end of this book, babies were not mentioned, so I'm adding it to this list. And the same could be said for my final recommendation of Heartless Sinner by Erica Wilde. This is about Marla and Vincent. He needs a wife to sort of mellow out his appearance within the mafia family. He needs to be seen as somebody who's got his shit together, who is mature, and who is capable of giving off the appearance that he has a stable foundation. Marla wants Vincent's help to avenge her brother's death. When she goes and asks for his help, he suggests that they enter into this bargain where she be his wife and he will help her avenge her brother's murderer. Marla had no intention of marrying into the mafia because she grew up in that world and she wants nothing to do with it. However, she knows the ins and outs of how it works. She knows what is expected. So they come to terms with this and they develop a relationship. As I mentioned, in future books, they could end up having children, but in this book, babies were not mentioned at the end of it. Let me know down in the comments, do you have a favorite book that doesn't end in babies? I am always on the hunt for more. But if you don't have a recommendation for me but would like to let me know that you made it to the end of this video, could you leave me 2 emojis? Could you leave me the no baby emoji so that I know you're here? Be sure to go check out Lisa's recommendations as well, and until my next video, thank you so much for watching, and go read a romance that doesn't end in babies. Bye!